Okay, so I just finished that German show on Netflix, and now I have some thoughts. I definitely don't think this show was bad by any means. I'd probably say it's actually pretty good, but I see a lot of people praising it as some kind of hidden gem masterpiece, and I don't really agree with that. So I'm just going to tell you guys about some of the things that bothered me about this show, and also a few things that I think it did well. So, here we go. Let me start off by saying that I kinda had a hard time getting through those first few episodes. It felt like the series was so focused on its mystery and stringing along the audience that it kind of forgot everything else. In those first few episodes, the characters are mostly either annoying or just have no development at all. I don't usually like talking about script writing 101 stuff like character development or character arcs and stuff like that, because I feel like it's generally missing the point to try and map a narrative system onto every story. It makes no sense. All stories are different, so why should they all be told using the same techniques and all judged by the same standards? But when you're writing a mystery thriller like this, you might want to get us to actually care about the characters if you want us to actually feel anything, because otherwise I'm just going to be staring at the screen thinking to myself, is this mystery really good enough to keep me watching this for 10 episodes? Early episodes consist almost entirely of scenes designed to advance the plot, with a few character-centric scenes peppered in so that we would understand the bare minimum about the various character dynamics. Honestly, these scenes kind of feel like they're from a different type of show. They add like soapy melodrama that just feels out of place and irrelevant to the story being told. It almost feels like entire scenes of character development were just deleted to give more room for the plot-driven moments. But then we're left with these character scenes that are presented as being really emotional, but just have no effect on me because I haven't empathized with any of these characters. To be fair, the mystery is pretty interesting, but I feel like this show just relies way too heavily on its plot to keep our attention. It's like every single scene is presented the way any other show would present a twist or a cliffhanger ending, but in this show they're not. They're just normal scenes, and you're sat there watching the show like, is this important? What's going on? To be honest, most of these flaws wouldn't bother me so much if the show didn't feel like a chore to watch. Everything's just so heavy and gloomy and, well, dark. And it's weird that that would be the show's main issue because it's obviously very intentional, but I just don't feel like it works. The score of the show is another big problem. The music is almost distractingly ominous, and it would have been way more effective if used more sparingly. It kind of ruins some scenes because of how overbearing it is.
Was? 10:30 Uhr?
Passte. Entschuldigung für die Umstände.
Ist doch kein Problem. Ich habe nur nichts gesehen. Also ich meine, es war alles ganz normal.
Um 6 hattest du Schichtende.
Mixed with the self-seriousness of the show, the omnipresent brooding music makes the show hard to take seriously at times. I feel like the constant use of music is to make it feel like it's slowly building up to something, but personally I just find it exhausting. And sometimes it's just downright weird. Visually speaking, the show is pretty good, and at times pretty great. There's a one-hour in episode 1, for example, that was really impressive.
Das ist meine Arbeitskleidung. Und außerdem ist Schule scheiße.
Ich bin mir sicher, dass der große Hautini auch zur Schule gegangen ist. Martha, kommst du bitte frühstücken?
Bist du eigentlich sicher, dass er nicht adoptiert ist?
Vermickelt und Mehrheit. Houdini. Aua!
Mama, wo ist mein schwarzer Kapuzenpulli?
Weiß ich nicht, vielleicht bei...
Anyway, people have been comparing this show to Stranger Things, and to be honest, that comparison might be fitting. Dark definitely feels like Stranger Things' edgier older brother who's going through a goth phase. Watching the show at times, I just feel like the creators were more interested in creating a mindfuck series than they were in telling a coherent, interesting story. They got so excited about the twists and cliffhangers that they thought were cool in shows like Lost or Mr. Robot or Twin Peaks or whatever, and they wanted to create one of those shows, but they didn't understand why those shows worked. Those shows had twists and surreal shit built into them, but they were never just about getting to those moments. Those moments were part of the story, but in the case of Dark, I sometimes feel like those moments are the entire story, and that's what keeps me at a distance when I watch the series. I don't feel attached, and I don't feel shocked. When I watch Mr. Robot, I feel shocked when big twists happen because I feel attached. You can't reverse engineer it and try to get me to feel attached just by shocking me. I guess one of the problems with the plot in the beginning was that the characters seem mostly detached from the main mystery of the show, and that wouldn't necessarily be a problem had the characters been interesting, but they weren't. The moment the show actually became interesting to me was in episode 4 when the characters' secrets start being revealed. I wanted to spend more time with these realistic, well fleshed out characters, not with this cartoonish evil priest who clashes with the rest of the series. It really feels like they're trying to blend two different stories together, and one is this interesting small town drama, and the other is a kind of corny, edgy sci-fi mystery. I will say though that they did a really good job with the casting of the younger versions of the characters. They really do look alike. Most of the acting seems pretty great to me as well, although I don't speak German so I can't really judge the line delivery. One of my pet peeves is when a show will throw in references to science or philosophy, and this show does it a lot. Although the science part is relevant for obvious reasons, but the way it's done just doesn't seem natural because none of the characters are scientists. So when an 11-year-old boy starts explaining the Big Bang to a priest, I'm just like, what? Why does this kid have a good understanding of the Big Bang Theory? Alright, because the writers needed a way to shove that down our throats. Also, an extension of this problem appears in episode 4. I hate it when characters talk about scientific concepts, but it's pretty obvious that the writer doesn't really know anything about physics, so it just comes off as really awkward when they're writing a scientist character who talks like a 14-year-old who's just discovered Neil deGrasse Tyson. This show does that a few times. When shows and movies do this, I always think to myself, why are you trying to explain this using science when you're clearly not a scientist? I mean, it's science fiction, you don't really need to explain it. They even have the scene where the scientist explains a wormhole using a piece of paper, which definitely has never been done before. The only thing that makes this type of thing even worse is when they also incorporate some Nietzsche in there for good measure. Of course, a TV series about time travel is going to mention Nietzsche's eternal recurrence. How original. And I don't know, maybe this is just me being a pretentious douche and maybe this doesn't bother anyone else, so let's just move on. Another pet peeve of mine is when a series has a scene in school where the kids are being taught about a book or something like that, where the themes of that story parallel the story of the show. The reason this annoys me is because it's so heavy-handed. In this show they have the classroom scene, but they also have one of the main characters act in a play that directly parallels the themes of the series, and it's so obvious. I mean, it's clearly not trying to be subtle, but both stories feature a red string, and it's like, we get it, okay? And maybe this is just me, but I can't help but think, how fucking coincidental is it that they happen to be performing a play that directly parallels our story? It just takes me straight out of the show because it makes everything feel artificial. Also, another thing that kind of annoyed me is that pretty much at exactly the same point in most of the episodes, they have this song play during a kind of montage, and it clashes so much with the tone of the rest of the show. When most of the score is this, then you get this. It just feels so out of place. And this brings me back to my issues with the emotional scenes in the show. If you want to make a cold, dark series with realistic characters and a slow, brooding pace, that's fine. There are lots of shows that do that well. But if you're going to do that, you can't then have these emotional montages that feel like they're from a CW show. It doesn't mesh, and it doesn't feel earned. Anyway, personally I found this show a little boring, but I definitely seem to be in the minority on that, so yeah, just give it a watch. You'll probably know whether you like the show or not after episode 1. Okay, bye.
Aber das ist auch nur eine Theorie.
A game theory!